Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari.
What's the verse?
351. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Acharya Ashrotar Sata Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Prabhupada.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Acharya Ashrotar Sata Shri Srimad, Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nam Acharya Shri Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Prem se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Reading from third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 5, titled Vidura's Talks with Maitreya, text number 1. Shri Shukaha Uvacha Dvari Dyu Nadyaha Rishabhaha Gurunam Maitreyam Asinam Agadha Bodham Kshata Upashritya Achutta Bhava Siddha Prapracha Saushilya Guna Abhitriptaha. Shri Shuka Uvacha. Shri Shuka Uvacha. Dvaridu Nadya Rishabha Kurunam. Dvaridu Nadya Rishabha Kurunam. Maitreyam Asinam Agadha Bodham. Maitreyam Asinam Agadha Bodham. Kshatopashritya Chuta Bhava Siddha. Kshatopashritya Chuta Bhava Siddha. Papracha Soshilya Guna Bhitriptaha. Papracha Soshilya Guna Bhitriptaha. Shri Shuka Uvacha. Dvaridu Nadya Rishabha Kurunam. Maitreyam Asinam Agadha Bodham. Kshatopashritya Chuta Bhava Siddha. Papracha Soshilya Guna Bhitriptaha. Shri Shuka Uvacha. Dvaridu Nadya Rishabha Kurunam. Maitreyam Asinam Agadha Bodham. Kshatopashritya Chuta Bhava Siddha. Papracha Soshilya Guna Bhitriptaha.
Please chant. Shri Shuka Uvacha Dvaridyundya Rishabha Kurunam Maitreyam Asinam Agadha Bodham Chatopashritya Chuta Bhava Siddha Papracha Shoshilya Guna Bhitripta Shri Shuka Uvacha Dvaridunadya Rishabha Kurunam Shri Shuka Uvacha Dvaridunadya Rishabha Kurunam Maitreyam Asinam Agadha Bodham Kshatopya Satrudja Bhava Siddha Papracha Shoshilya Guna Bhitripta Nyadya Rishabha Kurunam Maitreyam Asinam Agadha Bodham Katopashritya Chuta Bhava Siddha Papracha Shoshilya Guna Bhitripta
Shri Shuka Uvacha
Shabbakuruna Masinam Agadha Bodham Topashritya Chuta Bhava Siddha Shoshilya Guna Bhitripta
Shri Shuka Uvacha
Shri Shuka Uvacha Dvaridunadya Rishabha Kurunam Maitreyam Asinam Agadha Bodham Tropasritya Chuta Bhava Siddha Prapracha Shoshilya Guna Bhitripta Matajis Shri Shuka Uvacha Dvaridunadya Rishabha Kurunam Bodham Katopashitya Chuta Bhava Siddha Papracha Shoshilya Guna Bhitripta Shri Shuka Uvacha Bodham Katopashitya Chuta Bhava Siddha Papracha Shoshilya Guna Bhitripta Shri Shuka Uvacha Dvaridunadya Rishabha Kurunam Maitreyam Asinam Agadha Bodham Prashitya Chuta Bhava Siddha Papracha Shoshilya Guna Bhitripta Shri Shukaha Uvacha Shukadev Goswami said, Dvari, at the source of. Dyu, Nadyaha, the celestial river Ganges. Rishabhaha, the best of the Kurus. Kurunam, of the Kurus. Maitreyam, unto Maitreya. Asinam, sitting. Agadha, bodham, of unfathomed knowledge. Kshata, vidura. Upashritya, having approached near. Achyuta, the infallible Lord. Bhava, character. Siddha, perfect. Prapracha, inquired. Solshilya, gentleness. Guna, abhitriptaha, satisfied in transcendental qualities. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Shukadev Goswami said, Vidura, the best among the Kuru dynasty, who was perfect in devotional service to the Lord, thus reached the source of the celestial Ganges river, Hardvar, where Maitreya, the great fathomless learned sage of the world, was seated. Vidura, who was perfect in gentleness and satisfied in transcendence, inquired from him. Purport. Vidura was already perfect due to his unalloyed devotion to the infallible Lord. The Lord and the living entities are qualitatively the same by nature, but the Lord is quantitatively much greater than any individual living entity. He is never infallible, whereas the living entities are prone to fall under the illusory energy. Vidura had surpassed the fallible nature of the living entity in conditional life due to his being achyuta bhava, or legitimately absorbed in devotional service to the Lord. This stage of life is called achyuta bhava siddha, or perfection by dint of devotional service. Anyone, therefore, who is absorbed in the devotional service of the Lord is a liberated soul and has all admirable qualities. The learned sage Maitreya was sitting in a solitary place on the bank of the Ganges at Hardvar, and Vidura, who was a perfect devotee of the Lord and possessed all good transcendental qualities, approached him for inquiry. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutah Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vikasa Swaminiti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Shuka Uvacha Dvari Du Nadya Rishabha Kurunam Maitreyam Asinam Aghada Bodham Kshato Pashityachyuta Bhava Siddha pracha saushilya guna bitriptaha. Shukadev Goswami said, Vidura, the best among the Kuru dynasty, who was perfect in devotional service to the Lord, thus reached the source of the celestial Ganges river, Hardwar, where Maitreya, the great, fathomless learned sage of the world, was seated. Vidura, who was perfect in gentleness and satisfied in transcendence, inquired from him. This is the first verse here of the new chapter that we are starting, titled Vidura's Talks with Maitreya. And the chapters that we've been reading leading up to this in this third canto have been coming to this point where Vidura will inquire from Maitreya different subject matters, different topics. We've kind of got a glimpse of what they'll be speaking on based off the conversation between Uddhava and Maitreya. Uddhava and Maitreya, then also Uddhava and Vidura. And this chapter, as well as the majority of this canto, will be referencing this discussion between Maitreya and Vidura. And this verse in particular, it goes off the previous verse that was spoken on Sunday, talking about Vidura's journey to reach Maitreya Muni at Hardwar along the Ganges River. And in Srila Prabhupada's purport, he makes a lot of very important distinctions here. It's seemingly a very short purport, but Srila Prabhupada, he packs a lot in here. He puts a lot of philosophy and information within this purport here. So I'll try my best to go through and unpack it to my ability and capacity. But here in this chapter, Vidura, he's taking the position of a disciple. He is, as is described here, he is a great devotee who is completely absorbed in devotional service. And he's going to Maitreya and he's asking him about different subject matter. And the first sort of questions that he asks to Maitreya, they aren't necessarily directly about the Lord himself. Since Vidura here, he's taking the position of a disciple, he's showing us by his example. He first asks about the nature of this material world. He first asks about the difference between, the body and the soul, why the soul is suffering in this material world. And in this way, Vidura, he's using his position to educate us, because while Vidura, he's at this Achuta Bhava Siddha, or this perfection of devotional service, that is not practically the position that we find ourselves in. We find ourselves here on the path of devotional service, but we aren't at this perfected stage. And in fact, at least most of us here, we're simply at the beginning of our advancement in devotional service. So Vidura here, similarly to the position that Arjuna takes up on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he's taking this position of a disciple. He's taking this position of learning from someone who knows, because this is practically how we gain knowledge and how we get information. So the first thing that Prabhupada talks about here in the purport is this very important point about describing the Lord as infallible. Right? In the first sentence, Prabhupada says, Vidura was already perfect due to his unalloyed devotion to the infallible Lord. This word infallible, it's used a lot throughout Srila Prabhupada's books. And the exact meaning of infallible is someone who is never wrong. Generally, at least in the modern context, from what I was able to research, that generally people call doctors infallible or priests infallible, because especially one who is a doctor, you want them to know what they're talking about. One who's going to be cutting you open and doing a surgery, it's important that they know where everything is, which valve to cut. I've actually had practical experience in the hospital where the doctor, he doesn't know exactly which limb is to be amputated on, and he ends up amputating on the wrong limb. So imagine you have a problem with your right arm, you have some condition and you have some disease, and in the charts or somewhere, it's clearly stated that, this is the arm to be amputated. But the doctor, by some crazy mistake, he thinks that it's the other arm. So your perfectly good arm, that arm ends up getting amputated, and you're only left with your diseased arm. So it's very important that someone who is a doctor, someone who's a priest, even in this society, that they should be as infallible as they can. Because for one to be wrong and to make a mistake, it's very, very detrimental, as we can see in this material world. But the Supreme Lord, he is described as infallible. Krishna, he's never wrong and he never makes any sort of mistakes. And this is this big difference between us, the Jiva, and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is one of the most important distinctions that is talked about in Bhagavad Gita, right? Pretty much the first teaching we have is the distinction between what is matter and what is spirit, and the fact that we aren't this material body, but we're the spirit soul that's inside of the body. But after that, when one comes to the realization that they're actually spiritual energy and that they aren't of this material world, one can also be under the misconception that the Jiva and the super soul, which are both spiritual energy, are exactly equal. And Srila Prabhupada, he makes this very clear and distinct within the next sentence of this purport, saying, "The Lord and the living entities are qualitatively the same by nature, but the Lord is quantitatively much greater than any individual living entity." And this is greatly talked about by Krishna himself in the Bhagavad Gita. There's so many instances. One that I would like to talk about is, you can pull up Bhagavad Gita 13:22, and I'll do 23 as well. You could pull that up real quick. You can just go to the translation. Krishna says, "The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of material nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species." You can go to the next verse. Then Krishna says, "Yet in this body there is another transcendental enjoyer who is the Lord, the Supreme Proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the Supersoul." So this is the difference between the Jiva and the Supersoul. At the beginning of the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes the difference between the inferior and the superior energy, and he groups the Jivas within this superior energy. So it is not that we are part of this material energy, we are actually part of this spiritual energy, but we are part of a third form of energy, which is known as the marginal energy, or the marginal potency. And within Srila Prabhupada's purports in the Bhagavad Gita, he makes this distinction very clear, because even though the Jiva, it's part of the superior energy, it sometimes finds itself covered by the material energy, which is why it's called marginal. Basically, whichever energy the Jiva, the marginal energy, associates himself with, that's what he finds himself under. Like if the conditioned soul, the marginal energy, identifies himself with the material energy, then he becomes covered over and absorbed by that. But simply if we become fully absorbed by this spiritual energy, this superior energy, then we become part of the superior energy. Prabhupada would often use this example of the waves going up on a shore. Right? On the bank or on the shore of the ocean, sometimes the waves come up and they cover the sand. Sometimes they go back and they recede, and you can see the full amount of this shore of the beach. So this is this nature of the marginal energy of Krishna, where sometimes they're covered over and sometimes they are completely free of this illusory energy. And this is this big difference that we have here, where Krishna, he's infallible versus we are fallible. We are fallible because we're sometimes covered over by this inferior energy. We're sometimes covered over by illusion, right? The conditioned soul, he's subject to these 4 defects, and of which being under illusion and making mistakes are two of these defects that every single conditioned soul has. So, by nature, being under this illusory energy, we make so many different kinds of mistakes. We are very fallible, but we can get to the nature of infallibility as we see here through Vidura. It says, Vidura had already surpassed the fallible nature of the living entity in conditional life due to his being Achyuta Bhava. Now this phrase, Achyuta Bhava, it's actually very significant. This isn't the only instance where this comes up in Srimad Bhagavatam. If you could pull up Srimad Bhagavatam 1:5-12. This is Narada Muni speaking to Vyasadeva. You can go up to the Sanskrit here. We can see in this first sentence, it says, Naiskarmyam apyachuta bhava varjitam. And this Achyuta Bhava, it's described by Srila Prabhupada. This word Achyuta, it's actually quite similar to the word infallible, which is very important why Prabhupada uses this word infallible in the purport, because Achyuta means one who never falls down. And Krishna, he's one who never falls from the spiritual world. He never comes to this material world in a fallen state like we find ourselves in right now. And then this word bhava is generally considered to be relationship or sentiment. And the combination of these two words, Srila Prabhupada uses to define Krishna consciousness. This Achyuta Bhava can also be known as Krishna consciousness. So we can see that simply by being absorbed in this Krishna consciousness, that one can become free from this fallible nature of the living entity. And this is a very important concept and a very important idea, because this Krishna consciousness is what we're trying to cultivate. It's this stage that we're trying to come to. And it's only by this Krishna consciousness that we'll be able to become free from all of these illusions that we find ourselves under in this material world. It's the only way that we'll come to this understanding that even though we're qualitatively the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in quantity it's very much different. And it's very easy for one to understand if one is even in the beginning stages of Krishna consciousness, that even though the jiva, the individual soul, and the super soul, they're both situated within the heart. It's kind of described as these two birds that are within the tree. The super soul, he's the overseer, and he's within everybody's heart. And he's the controller and the overseer of everybody. Versus the individual jiva, he's only within the heart of this single body. He's only within this singular vehicle. Versus this super soul, he's within the hearts of everybody. And he's controlling everything and everybody. We might perceive ourselves as minute controllers because since we're by nature part of this superior energy, it's natural that we can manipulate to a certain degree this inferior energy, because that's the nature that we belong to. And Krishna, he's able to manipulate the entire material energy, versus we're able to, a very small extent, manipulate aspects of the material energy. But we can see that even though I might be able to control aspects of my own life and my own body, I can't control anything that anybody else does, right? No matter how hard I think and no matter how hard I meditate, I can't make any of you move your body or do something in a certain way that you don't choose to. Simply by my own power, I won't be able to engage in that sort of activity. But Krishna, he's in control and he's in charge of every single minute activity that's going on, not only within our own body, but within the body of everybody else. We can practically experience this because nobody here, nobody wants to get sick. Nobody wants to catch a disease. Nobody wants to have some sort of deformity or any form of incapacity to the body where the body might be sore, one part of the body might be weak. And no matter how hard we try by our own ability, we can't prevent this by our own nature. But Krishna, who's in control of all of these different things, he is able to put us in this position no matter how hard we try. So this is this very important difference that we must realize, and simply by this Achyuta Bhava, or this Krishna consciousness, one can begin to come to this great understanding. And it's this Achyuta Bhava, or this Krishna consciousness, which is very important to apply in all aspects of our life and in all aspects of this philosophy as well. Because this Srimad Bhagavatam and this conversation between Vidura and Maitreya, from an external perspective, it may seem to be the majority philosophy. It may just seem to be a philosophical discussion between two very great and learned people. But this philosophy, the center of it is Krishna. The center of it is this Achyuta Bhava, this Krishna consciousness. It isn't just some dry, speculative philosophy, but it actually gives us this full nourishment for everything that we're hankering for. As we've been able to experience to some extent, no matter how hard we try to speculate, or no matter how hard we try by our own mental capacity to understand things, it doesn't actually bring us that satisfaction, that this bhava that's being described, this relationship. Just by mundane speculation, one doesn't actually get to this relishable nectar which is understood as this Krishna consciousness. And this is why things like the Bhagavad Gita, this conversation here between Vidura and Maitreya, why these things are so relishable, this is because of this center being this Achyuta Bhava, this Krishna consciousness. And without this, people can speak so many different topics of Bhagavad Gita, or speak on the Vedas or the Vedanta Sutra, and they can have such long philosophical discussions and such a high level of just mundane philosophical understanding. But even after all of this, it doesn't actually get to this relishable core point, which is this Krishna consciousness. And, Krishna, he's the center of everything. Everything that we do, it's actually meant for Krishna. This is described in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Yagnartat karma no nyatra loko karmana. What's the line? Yagnartat karma no nyatra loko yam karma bandhanaha tarartam karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. That everything that we do, every activity, it's actually meant for Krishna, for the worship of Vishnu. But because we're not engaging in this activity, it simply leads us to bondage. So we might be able to speculate and engage in so much level of philosophical understanding, but unless we do it for the purpose of serving Krishna, we do it for the purpose of this devotional service, this Krishna consciousness, we won't actually get the highest level of benefit out of it. And this is why this devotional service is higher than anything else. This devotional service is even higher than any level of renunciation. This is also described in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, hopefully I don't mess this one up, Sannyasa yog karma yogascha nishayasya karavabhau tayostu karma sannyasat karma yogo vishishite. That both of these things, this renunciation and this activity in devotional service, both of these are very good. Both of these are good activities. But this activity in devotional service is greater than any level of renunciation. And this is precisely what's exhibited here by Vidura. It's described that he was fully absorbed in devotional service. And therefore he is a liberated soul with admirable qualities. So simply by being absorbed in this devotional service, we get to this highest level of Achyuta Bhava. We come to this highest level of understanding in Krishna consciousness by this activity and this engagement in devotional service. And we are engaged in this devotional service. We are engaged in service to Krishna through the medium of the spiritual master, through the medium of the Guru. And this is a principle that's also greatly illustrated here between Vidura and Maitreya, where Vidura, even though he's a perfect devotee, he's going to Maitreya, he's getting knowledge and he's getting instruction from Maitreya. And this is also a very fundamental understanding in Krishna consciousness, in our philosophy, about this high exalted position of the Guru, this high exalted position of the spiritual master. It's described that the Guru is to be considered as good as God. Why? Because without information coming from the Guru, without this descending knowledge that comes to the Guru directly from Krishna himself, about Krishna himself, we practically wouldn't know anything about Krishna. As I've described before, simply by our own mundane level of understanding, we won't actually find out this highest truth about Krishna. But we can easily gain entrance into this, pure and unadulterated information about Krishna through that of the spiritual master. Therefore, one who becomes a guru, one who takes this position of instruction, one who takes on the role of a spiritual master, all he simply has to do is repeat what his own guru said. Who repeats what his guru said, who repeats what his guru said, who's ultimately repeating what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna, his words in the Bhagavad Gita, as is already described here, Krishna, he's infallible. Krishna, he never falls down. He's achyuta. Krishna, he's never wrong and he never makes any sort of mistakes. So all we have to do is simply follow this process given to us by Krishna, simply follow Krishna's instruction in the Bhagavad Gita that have been given through us by Srila Prabhupada and our own spiritual master. And in this way, we'll be able to come to this achyuta bhava, this highest understanding. And the Guru, he's described as the external manifestation of the Supersoul, where the Supersoul is situated within the heart of everybody. He knows everybody's thoughts, everybody's actions, everybody's desires, and he's able to know the heart of the disciple and engage them in whatever level is required of them. And we can practically see this through the example of Srila Prabhupada, as so many of Srila Prabhupada's disciples have described. You listen through these memories of Srila Prabhupada by all of his different disciples, and you hear so many instances of Srila Prabhupada acting as the external manifestation of the Supersoul. One instance that I thought was pretty crazy was there was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and he was studying Prabhupada's books, and he really wanted to know, just because he wanted to know, how sickness comes about through the Vedic understanding. And he really wanted to ask this to Srila Prabhupada, but he was feeling a little shy. He was feeling a little embarrassed because he was like, this isn't like directly about Krishna, and it might just be like me trying to over-endeavor a little bit for my own understanding. And he had this question within his mind for quite a long time, actually. And he was with Prabhupada, and he was traveling with Prabhupada for a certain window of time. And then, one day he was just there with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada turns to him and says, 90% of sickness is caused due to the mind. And then the devotee was just like shocked, because there was he never inquired to Prabhupada about this. He didn't really even reveal this desire to know about this to any other devotee. And it wasn't like they were talking about any sort of related topic, but Prabhupada just turned to him and said, 90% of sickness and disease is caused by the mind. So Prabhupada, he knows these kind of things. He knows what's going on in the mind and the hearts of the disciples. I was just hearing another instance yesterday where there was one devotee. He was the temple commander at the temple in France that he was at. And because he was engaged in so much service, most of the time he wasn't able to go on the morning walks. But one day while Prabhupada was there, Bhagavan, who was the GBC and organizer at France at the time, he was like, okay, today you can go on the morning walk. And, being in so much ecstasy of being able to go on his first morning walk with Srila Prabhupada, he forgot to bring his chadar. So it was early in the morning, and he was actually very, very cold. And, he didn't want to disturb the morning walk and, make the whole morning walk about his needs and his desires. So he was just, walking in the back, trying not to disturb anybody. But he was thinking, dang, I'm really cold. This is, it's really suffering being out here without this chadar to keep me warm. And then, Srila Prabhupada, he's walking along and he's walking with his cane. And all of a sudden he stops, and he stops the whole walk. And he turns around and he looks at this devotee and he says, you are cold. Somebody give him a chadar. So this is amazing, actually, how Srila Prabhupada, he's able to see what's going on in the hearts and the minds of his disciples, and he's able, to fulfill these desires of his disciples. And he's, this is what a guru is. This is the position of guru. He's able to engage us in this high level of unalloyed devotional service. This unalloyed devotion to the infallible Lord is the main topic that's going to be inquired here between Vidura and Maitreya. And even this word, unalloyed, it's actually very significant and is very important. It's used throughout so many of Srila Prabhupada's purports, but it isn't really a common word used in modern English today. Srila Prabhupada, he actually gets and uses this word through a lot of the writings of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Srila Prabhupada's first disciples, they didn't know what this word meant either. And, in the beginning, throughout Srila Prabhupada's classes, he would use this word a lot. And, one day in the early days, Hamsaduta, he bought this big bus for all of the devotees to travel in. And feeling very excited about this new endeavor that he could use for Prabhupada's service, he pulled up to the temple with this big bus, and he wanted to take Srila Prabhupada around within the bus. And this story is told by Brahmananda Prabhu, I think. And all of them get on the bus, and Hamsaduta, he's driving the bus, and Srila Prabhupada, he's telling Hamsaduta where to go and where to drive, because they didn't necessarily have anywhere in particular that they were going to go, but they were following the instruction and the direction of Prabhupada, who he isn't from the area that they were at, and he's never driven in the city, but he's able to dictate and tell exactly where he's trying to go. And Brahmananda Prabhu, he's describing this instance with great awe. And they travel for some time, and eventually they get to this pier, which was actually where one of the places where Srila Prabhupada got off of the ship where he first came in America. And he was able to take the devotees all the way from the temple where they were at back to this pier. And all of the devotees, they got out of the bus, and it's described that Srila Prabhupada, he had his cane down here, and with a big swooping motion, he pointed his cane up and said, "We must perform unalloyed devotional service." And up there was this company, and it said, "Unalloyed Metalworks." So this pier that Srila Prabhupada got off of, this word unalloyed, it was there. And this word is actually very significant because, in alloy, or it's basically a metal that you get from the earth. You get a alloy, and generally it's mixed with different other metals, it's mixed with different other kinds of rocks, it's mixed with different other sorts of substances. And to get the pure alloy from the current situation that it's in, you have to free it of all of its impurities. So this term, unalloyed devotion, means devotion that's free from all impurities and free from all material contamination. And we can say it's a coincidence, but of course everything is due to the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that this word unalloyed, it was right there on the pier in which Srila Prabhupada got off this ship, and the devotees were just like shocked and amazed. They're like, whoa. And this is who Srila Prabhupada was. This is the position of guru, and this is the position of the spiritual master. And we can learn so much through the lives of these great personalities. We can learn so much through the example of Srila Prabhupada's faithful followers, and specifically here we can learn so much by the character of Vidura, who by his devotional service became a perfect devotee and possessed all transcendental qualities. And by this life and example of Vidura, we can learn about the nature of this unalloyed devotional service. And by this practice of unalloyed devotional service, it's how we can get to this high stage of Krishna consciousness. And this Krishna consciousness, it must be unalloyed. All of our thoughts, all of our actions, all of our activities, they must be engaged in devotional service. And that's how we can always be Krishna conscious. It isn't that we sit somewhere and we renounce everything, and we should expect just to be able to sit there and be Krishna conscious all the time. But it's by practically engaging in this devotional service that we can be Krishna conscious all the time. If we're always engaged in Krishna service, if we're always doing things with the mindset of, I'm doing this for the pleasure of Krishna, I'm doing this for the pleasure of my spiritual master, and you don't do it with any material desire or any idea of material gain, then it's no question that you'll be Krishna conscious 100% of the time. Because everything that you're doing, it's for Krishna. You'll, by simply engaging in this devotional service, one can always be 100% Krishna conscious. So we should, like Vidura is doing, we should dedicate our whole lives to these 9 processes of devotional service. This Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Dasyam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. By engaging our whole lives in these 9 processes of devotional service, it's no question that we'll be Krishna conscious. And if we're Krishna conscious throughout our whole life, then it's no question that we'll think of Krishna at the time of death. And Krishna, he promises us that at the time of death, if we simply think about Krishna, we'll go back home, back to Godhead. So this is the promise that's given to us by Krishna, and it isn't just Krishna's promise. Krishna's promise is practically exhibited and practically experienced here through the example of Vidura. That simply if one engages in this devotional service, one can be fully Krishna conscious and one can go back home, back to Godhead. So I'll end my class here. Sorry if I missed any points or anything, but if there's any questions, comments, or concerns, I'll take those now. Kalki Prabhu?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So I have a comment and a question. So my comment is, so in this verse, just kind of, I guess, another angle looking at it, I was thinking also it's glorification of Vidura, because it's mentioned here, well, a couple of things, that he's the best amongst the Kurus. What is it? Rishabha Kurunam. He's also perfect in devotional service. You talked about that. And then he's perfect in gentleness and satisfied in transcendence. And I was thinking also, I mean, some of these different things can be elaborated upon. But in the previous verse, I think that was, I don't remember exactly what verse that was, maybe like 35 or whatever. But it's mentioned in the previous chapter, but it's mentioned that when Krishna left this world, that he was thinking of Vidura. So I was thinking that this, in one sense, it could be maybe inferred that he's the best amongst the Kurus in this verse because he was thought of Krishna when he left. That kind of signifies why he's like the best. But I think that verse was Atmanam Charu Kuru Shreshta.
Yeah.
So, and anyway, so those 4 things. My question was, so it's mentioned here that Vidura was perfect in gentleness and satisfied in transcendence. what maybe you can elaborate upon how we can practically be satisfied in transcendence and what that looks like and what that doesn't look like.
Yeah, I mean, the nature of devotional service, the nature of this activity in Krishna consciousness, is that one isn't left hankering. We see in this material world, we might get so much knowledge, we might get so much position, but still we're disturbed by this duality of this hankering in this material world. So this, just simply the nature of this devotional service, and when one is completely absorbed in devotional service, then they're completely satisfied in everything that they're doing. They aren't just looking for the next thing or looking for the next change in their service. But whatever they're doing, as long as they're engaged in Krishna service, as long as they're in the association of devotees, they're completely blissful and they're completely satisfied. They don't have any other desire than to fully engage in Krishna consciousness. Like, I know in my own life, I keep wanting to do so many different things here and there, and I'm not very satisfied just in one particular service, or even in the service that I am doing. I'm thinking, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. But Vidura, he's whether Krishna is present before him. There's that verse given to us by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Shikshastakam that Ashlishyava padaratam penastumam adarshana marmahatam karotuva yatatata va vidadatu lampato mat prana natastu sa eva naparaha. That Krishna can be present before me. He can, he can do so many different things. He can, he just by his external qualities, by material standards, one might think that this person, he's a debauchee. But no matter what, he's my worshipful Lord, birth after birth. So this is the position that Vidura finds himself in, that he's completely satisfied in transcendence. He's completely satisfied in this knowledge about Krishna. He's completely satisfied in his position of Krishna consciousness, and he's not looking for anything else, right? He's inquiring from Maitreya, and he's asking Maitreya Muni about all these different questions, but really he's doing this for our benefit, because this is the position that we find ourselves in. And if we didn't have this conversation available to us, then we wouldn't have so much information. So this information and this knowledge about Krishna, it can completely satisfy everything and all of our desires that we're looking for. And naturally, when one is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, he develops these different qualities that Vidura is exhibiting. Specifically here, we have perfect in gentleness. So this is the quality that we even see of devotees in our own lives who are fully engaged in Krishna consciousness and fully engaged in devotional service. So that's what I would say, if that answers your question. Ali Krishna Prabhu.
I was just looking up this unalloyed word when you brought that up, and there's that definition that you're speaking of, that this metals that become, or that they're pure. But there's another one here that's interesting. It says, it's chiefly regarding emotions, complete and unreserved. So unalloyed delight is an example. And I just thought that also applies. It's really nice, It's like, and it made me think of like going on Harinam, and like how all the devotees are just unreserved out there, just going crazy, like no shame, no like social like idea of like social decorum, I guess you could say, And then there's people that are like very reserved, and like they see us, and then we go up and grab, like Abhimanyu Sudhaprabhu goes and grabs them and pulls them, and then they become unreserved, Then they start dancing, and they kind of get absorbed in that. Same like book distribution, devotees that can go out and just speak to anyone and everyone. And they're not shy, they're not reserved. It's that same, like, that's that feeling there of doing whatever for Krishna, and just, no shame, no idea of like, what will they think about me, and this kind of thing. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Prabhupada's purports and the words that he uses, you're just blown away, Prabhupada, he is a great pure devotee, but he's also such, like a learned scholar. He has so much knowledge about everything, and his word choice, in all of his purports, it's so perfect, and it like this word unalloyed, like I heard it so much, but until I heard that memory by Brahmananda Prabhu, like I didn't really even like think about what does this word exactly mean, because you like hear that phrase unalloyed devotional service so much, but it actually has such a deep meaning and such a deep understanding, and this is who Srila Prabhupada is, it's amazing. Tapas Prabhu.
Also, that was a nice story about like how this devotee was wondering about like what caused this like diseases, and then Prabhupada randomly just said it like to answer his question.
Yeah.
Recently, like I was reading in the Bhagavatam about Dhruva Maharaj and how immediately when he left, Narada Muni was sent, and like he heard about the news, and then in the purport it was like one may like question like how did he find out, like who did he like find out, because he was only amongst like the mother or whatever. But then Prabhupada said because he was like Tri Kala Gyan, and he explained how that works, and because he said since the super soul knows everything, and the guru is also like tapped in with the super soul, so immediately when like Dhruva Maharaj found like he came up with the courage to go leave, Dhruva Maharaj got sent to the forest, and basically hold on, wait, I gotta go back to hold on. Okay. As soon as he left, he said that he sent Narada Muni, and Narada Muni went to go initiate him because, his super soul was with him. So he found out that way.
Yeah, by the mercy of Krishna, one gets a guru, and by the mercy of guru, one gets Krishna.
Yeah.
So, that's just a practical example in the life of Dhruva Maharaj, that one just has to be, sincerely, even though his was with some material motive in the beginning, but Narada Muni he knew because you said he's a Tri Kala Gyan. But yeah, that story with Prabhupada and his devotee was amazing. Yeah. Where it was like he was just sitting with Srila Prabhupada, and it was literally completely quiet, like they weren't speaking about anything. Like I think it's described that this devotee, he was like chanting, and Prabhupada just turns to him and says, 90% of disease is due to the mind. It's like, whoa, So yeah, it's amazing. Vamsi Prabhu?
Hare Krishna. So actually, I had a question related because there is a relation between the 35th verse and this verse also. I find it like that, I don't know. So, your Mitravan Prabhu had said that this crying, like it's on the stage of bhav. But then, if you see the beginning of the purport, Prabhupada says that Vidura was overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love when he understood the Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thought of him at the last moment. So here we see that Krishna had tears for him, isn't it? And then in the last line of the purport, Prabhupada is qualifying that it's not on the stage of bhav, but like one who can cry for the Lord in love is certainly successful in the line of devotional service. Before that line, he says that this crying is the last word in the progressive path of devotional service. And then this, where he mentions this Achyuta Bhav, there also he's saying that this stage of life is called is called Achyut Bhav Siddha, or perfection by dint of devotional service. So this perfection is prem, or is it like, because I see is that love, because Prabhupada qualifies in the previous verse that this is the final stage, he's saying, this crying. So what?
Yeah, I mean this phrase Achyuta Bhava, it translates to Krishna consciousness. That's like the translation that's given by Srila Prabhupada. So it isn't necessarily saying that this is what's present on the stage or the level of bhav, but this is the word here that Srila Prabhupada is using, and it comes from that verse that I pulled up, 1:5-12. This understanding of Achyuta Bhava, where it isn't necessarily talking about the exact stage of devotional service known as bhava, but it's talking about one who's completely absorbed in devotional service. That's what I would
But
say.
in the previous verse, 35th, it says that. Yes. Yeah, one second. Where is that previous? 1 second. Because in the previous verse, means not the previous to that.
Okay.
Prabhupada says that this crying is the last word in the progressive path of devotional service. So is he talking about the last stage or what? That's what I wanted to know,
Are you asking if this Achyuta Bhava is describing the last stage of devotional service? Yeah. That's what I would say. Because it isn't saying that this stage of bhava is the highest level, but when one is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, one is on this highest stage of devotional service.
Yeah, it seems like Srila Prabhupada would say things like, it seems like you see in his letters, if you just stay absorbed, if you just do service all day and you stay absorbed in Krishna consciousness, then your spiritual life is perfect. So, or, to stay constantly absorbed in serving the Supreme Lord, by, following the morning program, this and that, and all these different things. That's perfection in Krishna consciousness. It doesn't seem to me like Srila Prabhupada's saying that, if you do that, then automatically you're on the level of prema. But at least you're perfectly situated in Krishna consciousness. So it seems like something like that somebody who can cry for Krishna, who can even use, perhaps materially tinged emotions for the purpose of Krishna consciousness, then that's a very good situation, because by that emotion, by that the determination that comes from that emotion, then one will, naturally very quickly make progress, and Krishna sees that determination. Or rather, I should say that the emotion is a symptom of the determination, so or of the desire to be Krishna conscious. So it seems to me like it's something like that. Like that's the last word in Krishna consciousness, in the sense that one who can do that, or one who has that much emotion for Krishna, that much desire to serve him, then even if he's not perfect, that's the situation which brings about perfection. That's kind of how I was seeing it, I guess.
But here, the context in which Prabhupada is speaking, it's about Vidura, the personality. It's not like not of like ordinary jiva like me crying for Krishna. It may be out of emotions, or it may be out of distress or anything, But then we know the history of Vidura. We know his context with the context in which the Lord is dealing with him. So in that terms, it's like I don't see it as bhava, because even in the purport, Prabhupada is saying that it's the final, because he's qualifying that with the statement. Like this crying is the last word, because that's the reason I feel, although he took it from the second canto, that in the bhava stage, a devotee cries and tears flows. But then it's like, it's for general personalities. But like for Vidur, I don't feel, that's the reason I wanted to know whether it's prema or is at the level of bhava. Yeah.
At least like in that, I don't have the verse up exactly. Let me just pull it up. Yeah, but in that, I think I'm somewhere else in the Bhagavatam. Anyways, but in that word for word, Prabhupada, the word prem is used, so at least I would kind of say like it's probably safe to indicate that they're speaking of like Vidur's experiencing prem, because that's specifically mentioned. That's what I would say, like at first. Anyways, I had a question. I don't know if you want to go to the Mataji's, because it's...
Mataji's have any questions? Yeah. Okay.
I wrote this question down, But in the Bhagavad Gita, it discusses that the higher self, which is a higher state of mind, of consciousness, which is ruled by Krishna, is the best way to be in close connectivity and connection with him. So how do we stay in this higher self and higher state of consciousness, even as we do service? And I say that because we are carried by these vessels at times as we do and fulfill these services, but we can also disconnect from this higher state of consciousness because we feel like we're just completing a task to get it done. And how do we not drop into this materialistic state of mind, but continue feeling that connection that this is all for you?
Yeah, frequently asked question. I mean, if I knew the answer, then my own devotional service would probably look a lot different. But at least philosophically understanding, if we do everything with the mindset of, we're doing this action, we're doing this activity, and we're doing it for Krishna, then this mundane conception and idea, it won't really come in, because Krishna's a person, where we can be fully absorbed in this person's service, and we have a personal relationship with Krishna. So it isn't just that you're engaging in some activities to get them done, but you're personally serving somebody. And by engaging in all of your devotional service with this mindset and with this activity, like you can see the actions and the activities of Vidura, where anything that he's speaking about, any activity that he's doing, any action that he's engaging in, he's always thinking about Krishna in that action and in that activity. So, if throughout the process of us engaging in our devotional service and throughout our service, if we're able to see it with this idea that we're serving this person, Krishna, then we can come to that high level of understanding, and we learn that through doing everything for the service of the Guru, doing things for the service of this spiritual master. The spiritual master, he teaches us how to serve Krishna, and we can first learn that by serving the spiritual master, where we can develop a close, loving relationship with the spiritual master, and by doing everything for the service of the spiritual master, then eventually we can come to this level and understanding of doing everything for Krishna. So, that's why one has to accept and serve a bona fide spiritual master, and then that will gradually one's consciousness will become purified in that way, if that answers your question.
It did. I also, just hearing your statement, let's say like we're fulfilling a service, and like sometimes like we can be in our mind, but I have like kind of like an understanding that Bhakti yoga is more of a heart and soul level. So if we focus on our souls and our heart, which is where Krishna resides as we do our service, is this a way of recognizing that he's the doer, and would that allow us like fulfill our service like more in love than more in just like getting it done?
I mean, that sounds like a little more impersonal per se. That's like generally the mystic yogis, they meditate within Krishna in the heart as Paramatma. But here in devotional service, we have devotees, we have the Guru, and we have a personal relationship with Krishna. So it isn't that we like focus on our heart while we're engaging in devotional service, but we can think of the actual person that we're serving, and in this way we'll actually be able to come to that loving stage of devotional service, because by just in this material world, if we want to show and express our love for someone, it isn't that we just like meditate on them within our heart, but we do certain activities for them, and we want to see and experience how they're actually pleased. So it isn't just that by meditating on Krishna within our heart that we come to this level of understanding, but by serving the devotees and by serving the spiritual master, that's how we come to that higher level of experience and understanding. There was another question over there.
It was just a comment. I'll make it quick. I don't remember the exact lecture, but basically, I was hearing it's an old lecture from like the 90s, but from Bhaktivikas Maharaj, and he was making a point of like a similar situation where one of his female disciples was telling about how she was, just desiring that, Maharaj would look at her. It was like at Shravan and Kirtan camp, and she was desiring that Maharaj would look at her, and he didn't. And she was so like distraught because typically every time that they would see each other, he would always speak or like glorify her service or something, because she was like very engaged in the program planning and everything. So she was very distraught, but she was meditating on how, well, maybe, like this is just to crush my false ego and, my desire to be appreciated and everything. And so Maharaj was making the point how he didn't intentionally do that, it was just simply that, Paramatma was guiding him in such a way that we can, and then he was making the point that, we can how he, out of his humility, was saying it is that it's not that, I'm being told all the details and like being directly guided on like how I'm supposed to, know the innermost desires and thoughts of my disciples, but it's more so that Paramatma is guiding me to act in such a way that it fulfills that action, but not that, like I'm like, reading from a script kind of thing. So I was just wanting to make that point.
Okay. Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.